on one of these occasions, at roughly the age of 15, I was coming out of Chalker Park Fair, which is a regular thing every summer in Southend, and I was accosted by a group of what I call neo-Nazis, racist thugs, whichever phrase we want to use, and they were men in their 20s. They had machetes, they had knuckle dusters, they had clubs, and I got separated in the flight and pursuit from my friends, and found myself surrounded by these guys, and honestly thought it was the last day of my life. And this stranger who I found just on the street, who was coming out of the fair, again, a man in his 20s, and I couldn't remember his name, so I guessed it as best as I could as being Matt. He sought to reassure me. He said, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you," and attempted to intervene to prevent these racists from attacking me. And what happened next stuck with me for 25 years. It was simply terrifying. They called him a packy lover. Instead of stabbing me, they forced me to watch as they punished him for sticking up for me. They stabbed him, they beat him all over his body. He fell to the floor, and they weren't satisfied. Like a pack of hyenas, they were stamping on his body as he was on the floor. I was paralyzed. I mean, I'm riddled with guilt ever since, and I try and reassure myself that I was only 15 years old.
Sure.
And I never saw this man again. The police came, and the racists ran, and the paramedics took him away. The police began questioning me. I was the only one left on the scene, and it's a typical cliche. They assumed I was the one that had attacked the man, and I then began shouting at the police, and we had a bit of a shouting match, while I could see the racists up the street who were chanting and mocking and still making the Nazi salutes. I eventually found from the paramedics that they said he had a punctured lung.
God.
And they took him away, and I never saw him since. And that event led to a knock-on effect of a series of events where I began to self-segregate myself from society. I didn't trust having white friends in case that ever happened again. And I ended up becoming full of hatred for mainstream society due to my experience with the police and the various racist stabbings. Yeah. And so I just thought this at this time in this climate, I was speaking to my missus, and she'd heard something on a podcast about somebody tracking someone down. And it hadn't occurred to me before. I don't know whether it's because I wanted to bury a lot of this in my past, but I decided actually after a conversation with her that I should try and find this man. So a couple of days ago, I put out an appeal on social media, and the Evening Echo, the local Essex newspaper, ran the story. Then the BBC ran the story, and one of his friends who was apparently out with him that night saw the story in the local paper and sent it to him. And then he contacted me, interestingly enough, through my LBC contact page, sent a number, and last night, I managed to pluck up the courage to call him.
Mate.
And I learned, James, he was an army man.
Right.
And that's
sense.
so significant for British Muslims to hear, because we've not had a healthy relationship with our police nor our army in this country for my generation. I'm 40 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't know all this time that he was an army man. And it's so touching that a man who, for the next 10 years, I began talking about British occupation of Muslim lands. The genocide in Bosnia had happened. I was furious, angry, and I will say I was full of hate. But
it was a soldier that saved your life.
It was a soldier. And I said to him, I believe you saved my life. He's asked not to be identified. His name, it turns out, was quite natural, I think, isn't Matt.
How did you confirm? Forgive me, Maajid. How did you confirm it was him?
I asked him to tell me from his side, what he remembers happening.
Yeah.
And there were some details in the story that I didn't place in the story that he told me that I just started crying on the phone.
I bet you
when
did.
he told me that he started telling me what happened.